Welcome to Rock Solid IP, expert strategies for creating real value from your creativity and innovation.
Hello and welcome to Rock Solid IP, expert strategies for creating real value from your creativity and innovation. This is part 2 of our Trademark Bootcamp series with Rob Wells. Well, Rob is from Rock IP Law Firm in Washington, D.C., who's here to guide us through the dynamic world of trademarks. His expertise will help unravel the mysteries of trademark law and explain why securing your intellectual property is so important. So this is a talk about why we have trademarks. Rob, good to see you again.
Likewise, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
All right. So what is the primary motivation for businesses to pursue trademark protection, and why is it so important?
Great. So the reason that we have a trademark, as we discussed a little bit in our last episode, is because what you need to do is protect the ability for consumers to recognize the source of your products and services. And when you're doing that, you're trying to make sure that you prevent confusion in the marketplace so that consumers don't mistake your product or services from that of your competitors. You also want to make sure that you safeguard your investment. Typically, companies spend a lot of money trying to establish brand recognition, trying to make sure that people recognize and want to come find your particular brand. The additional reason that you get a trademark registration is to ensure that you're provided the legal right to enforce your mark, potentially against either counterfeiters or imitators, people who are trying to imitate your product, or to try to prevent anyone else from also using your mark and creating additional confusion in the marketplace.
So obviously, doing what you do, you see it as an essential strategy for a business to do this, to do their trademarks. A lot of businesses look at it more as a formality. Is that fair? Is that something that you see?
We do see that. A lot of companies tend to come to us and they will either say, oh, it is just a formality, or they'll say like, oh, it's expensive, or they will let us know that they think they've got their name covered, their trademark, because they have a business registration, because they're incorporated in Delaware or whatever state they're in. Or they'll tell us, no, my business is just too small. It's really not just a formality. If you don't file your trademark application, that does leave you vulnerable to infringement, or possibly for disputes as well. One of the things that happens in trademark registration is that we will go ahead and usually we'll conduct a clearance search. We'll look and see if there's anyone else in the country, for example, that is currently using your mark, whether they're another business, maybe registered in another state or elsewhere. And we'll let you know whether you have a problem, whether you are cleared to use your mark. If somebody else pops up out of the woodwork and happens to be using the same name that you were using and you just didn't check, you're vulnerable to potential lawsuits, to cease and desist letters, possibly to being forced to rebrand, which means that you're going to lose all the goodwill that you've been working to establish, all of the brand recognition that you've been working to establish, and that frankly isn't cheap.
Yeah. And what a hassle to have to do all that all over again, especially after you're established.
And it's really frustrating for a lot of our clients that unfortunately make that kind of a mistake.
Right. Can you also speak to how trademark protection helps businesses establish their brand identity and differentiate themselves in the marketplace? Because it's not all about protection.
You're right. It's not just about protection. One of the reasons that you want a mark is to try to make sure that you differentiate your business from others that are similar. During our last episode, we talked a little bit about the fact that you need to identify the class of goods and services that you apply to. You want to make sure that you distinguish yourself from others who potentially make the same type of product. Think, McDonald's versus Burger King. You want to make sure that you differentiate. You want to make sure that you also try to make your mark, your products and services memorable to consumers. And you want to try to make sure that you do that in as many ways as possible, whether that's just with the character mark, a catchy name, or possibly a catchy slogan, or a particular design that's easily recognizable, and maybe one that consumers are attracted to. Those are all really important, reasons that, you might need and want an effective trademark.
When you say McDonald's and the Burger King, they made me think of the movie Coming to America. I don't know if you ever saw that. There was a guy who created a McDowell's, very similar, but it was it was very funny. It cracked me up.
Right. Yeah. And that was, done in a movie. So be it. But McDonald's in reality would have had a pretty big issue with a company that had golden arches and everything else. One of the other things there that you can see occurring there is that the layout of the store, when Eddie Murphy walked into that store, the golden arches were there and the store layout looked very similar to what we expect in a McDonald's. It wasn't substantially different. All of those things can be used and are part of brand recognition, and they can be trademarked.
Classic movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, go check it out. Can you also explain the role of trademarks in building trust? Because we talked about brand recognition and the protections that you get with it, but trust is another thing that comes along with a trademark.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And what you're aiming for is for consumers to recognize that hopefully your product is superior, is better than others. So there's kind of a quality assurance component to your brand and to your trademark that you want your trademark to carry. It'll also provide you with, if you've registered your trademark, you have the opportunity or the ability, once you kind of are establishing, to expand, maybe to franchise or to license your mark. Think about, for example, Nike. Nike is, their products are certainly sold, and you recognize the Nike swoosh. There's other apparel that's made by companies that are licensing Nike's mark. They're able to sell the product with with that logo on it, with the Nike swoosh or the Nike, font and mark. And those are, licensed. To go back to the quality assurance, Nike takes very extensive measures to make sure that those who license their mark are producing their products that they sell with the Nike mark on it at least the standards that, that they have for themselves. So there's, again, that quality assurance. And then also for market positioning, trying to build a market and gain additional brand recognition and market recognition is important for that as well.
So is it fair to say trademarks contribute to more of a long-term growth and sustainability of a business?
Absolutely. And it's important from the very beginning all the way through, as your company grows, right from the start all the way until you're, Fortune 500 company or Fortune 100 company, as the case may be. Brand recognition is typically very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there other ways that you can think of that trademarks contribute to that long-term growth?
So, in terms of brand value, as your brand becomes more and more recognizable, your trademark becomes one of the most valuable assets that your company has. We've talked in prior episodes about an Ocean Tomo study that was done that showed that at this point, over 90% of the Fortune 500 value is in intangible assets, and trademarks are a huge portion of that. The ability to recognize a particular brand is massive. Additionally, the potential for legal disputes, failing to make sure that your brand is well protected exposes you and potentially creates significant issues for you down the road. So making sure that your mark is protected and registered puts you in a position where you're able to A, enforce your mark, and B, to maintain it and keep the brand recognition that you're working hard to establish.
Does it help you? I mean, if someone's trying to, take your reputation and build their own brand out of it, is that something you can go after if you've got the right protections in place?
Yeah. And that's one of the big reasons that you want to go ahead and register your marks, is so that you can do that. If you've got a mark that you've registered, then you have the ability and in fact, the responsibility to police and enforce your mark. So to be looking for people who are counterfeiting, trying to, rip off your mark, or to create a competing mark, or to confuse your mark with others in the industry. You can maintain that kind of bubble of brand recognition for yourself.
Do you feel like there's a different motivation behind trademarking for small businesses versus large corporations? Is there anything different that you see? Should it be the same? What's your overall take there?
Overall, it really is kind of the same purpose, but the two sizes of companies, maybe a startup company versus, we've been talking about like Fortune 500, Fortune 100, the strategies that they use are potentially different, but the purpose is essentially the same, right? You're trying to establish brand recognition and credibility, secure your rights so that you can continue to grow. And so those are typically the motivations for small companies. For larger corporations, they're trying to maintain brand equity. They're trying to enforce their marks against competitors or counterfeiters, and they're trying to hopefully protect an expectation among in the public of a high value asset, or possibly to expand into multiple other industries. We take a look at Apple, for example. If you go back to, I'll date myself here, go back 20, 30 years ago, Apple was just computers. They weren't into these other industries where, just consumer electronics. They didn't make phones. They didn't make other things, but now they are. And the recognition of that brand name allows them quicker and easier access into separate and different verticals.
And you talked in the past about small companies that might not get their trademark stuff taken care of, and then a bigger company might swoop in and kind of, I don't know, tell them they can't use that anymore because they didn't trademark it in time or never trademarked it at all, right?
Sort of. Yeah. There's, we're confusing a little bit between trademarks and patents. In the trademark area, you should be okay as long as you're the primary user, the first person to use your mark. The registration should still belong to you, should still be entitled to use it. But there certainly is an issue where let's say you and another competitor are kind of coming up at the same time with very similar names. That's going to create a pretty big issue. And if you're a small company and there is a larger company and you both come up with the same, name for related or similar products, or even related names for that same product, the larger company probably has a little bit of a deeper pocket and might be able to outlast you and win that war. Larger companies, for better or for worse, they do have more resources to put into enforcing their mark, and they typically have departments that are more dedicated to making sure that they enforce those. And for smaller companies, they don't necessarily have the same resources.
Definitely. So how often do businesses come to you after getting in trouble or facing a legal issue, related to a trademark, where you're like, this could have been avoided if you had taken care of this earlier?
Unfortunately, it happens pretty frequently. One of the big issues that we get is we'll hear from a company that says, "Hey, we've got the name, we've chosen a name, and we're ready to go forward and get and try to get a trademark." They're typically already using the mark and have been, hopefully, or not hopefully, they have been using the mark with their product or with their company for 1, 5, 7 years, and then we get a phone call from them saying, like, either A, we've received a cease and desist letter and we need to figure out what to do about this, or number two, hey, we need to register the mark, but then we find out there's actually already another mark out there that is going to require you to rebrand and choose something else, find something different that's more distinctive and doesn't encroach on anyone else's intellectual property. That becomes a problem.
Yeah, I would say so. Is the motivation to trademark shifting, or has it shifted over time as digital and online presence is so important? Are more companies being more proactive about it?
I think that there is a shift towards protecting your marks. The global reach of online sales and e-commerce, those are really leading to more of an awareness of other brands, of other companies and whatnot. The additional flattening of the world, if you will, making it easier to get products across the globe. And Amazon, for example, is a great example, making it possible for companies from around the world to sell products into the United States and into other countries, makes it more important to try to distinguish yourself and to come up with a distinctive brand. And I think that is putting a little bit of an emphasis for companies on brand recognition and ultimately then on trademarks.
And at what point would you recommend a business, like an emerging business, that you got an idea for a product or an app or whatever? At what point should they come talk to you?
The sooner, the better.
Really? Yeah.
The right approach would be really to come to us and say, hey, we've got this product. Here are 4 or 5 names we're considering, and we would like to know if any of them are available. We'll do what we call a naming project, which is pretty much a kind of a light clearance search. We'll take a look and see whether there's any clear evidence that any of that your mark may or may not be available. And we'll rank those 5 different terms, A, in terms of distinctiveness, and then B, in terms of any potential conflicts that exist with existing marks. And we'll let you know which marks look like they're available. And then you can go ahead and pick one, and we'll run a clearance search and make sure that, as sure as we can be, that mark is actually available. And then we'll register it. That avoids a situation where you're already either kind of in love with a mark or heaven forbid, you have actually started putting a lot of money and effort into brand recognition, into branding your product or service, and then finding out down the road that unfortunately you're going to have to rebrand because the mark is already taken, or because it was too generic or just descriptive.
I didn't even mean to do that, but I believe that's the naming project is the topic of our next part in this series. What a segue. What a teaser I did there. That was impressive. Yeah, worked out well. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of our Trademark Bootcamp, Rock Solid IP, Expert Strategies for Creating Real Value from Creativity and Innovation with Rob Wells. To connect with Rob, visit rock-ip.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. And as I mentioned before, episode 3, the naming project, is going to come out soon. So we're excited for that. Thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.